Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for a new PB&J card class, and in today's video I'm going to be doing some scenic stamping with Penny Black's newest birch tree stamp, and I'm going to show you 3 different cards featuring this birch tree stamp and some slight variations that you can do with it. I love a good birch tree. I think they're beautiful in the winter, but I also love incorporating stamps like this into autumn and fall stamping, even spring if you add some leaf stamping around them. So I'm so glad Penny Black has added this to their collection. This is 40-867 Beautiful Birch. Now all of the cards I will be working on are a standard 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card, and I am stamping onto Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock in my MISTI stamp positioning tool. I am inking the stamp here with Versafine ink in the color of Smoky Gray. I find this is like the perfect birch tree color, and I am stamping it once and then putting that ink again onto the trunk area just to darken that area up a little bit. Here I've grabbed some Eclipse masking paper, and I am also going to stamp onto this. This is like a giant roll of sticky note and I'll be using that mask in just a little bit. Now you can see here on that first one I stamped the entire birch tree image with all of those branches outstretching, but then I'm going to stamp it with just part of the image showing because I wanted to add some other things over on that other side. So you can alter this stamp to use it however you would like. Now I went ahead and cut out this mask from that Eclipse masking paper. I did not cut out all the tiny branches. Life is too short for that. It's also not necessary for the techniques I'll be doing, but mostly I just wanted to get the trunks and any of those larger, thicker branches, just the thick parts that outstretched over to the side. Now I'm going to use an ink blending tool and a foam pad to ink up my background. All of the colors of inks that I am using, markers, everything will be listed down in the YouTube description box below. I will also list and link all of the Penny Black products down in that YouTube description box below so you can easily get a closer look at them in our online store. Now as I apply my ink here, I'm using a very light touch. I am sometimes pouncing and sometimes swiping, sort of starting on the trunk of the tree on that mask and swiping outwards to either keep the littler pieces down. But if they slide around just like that did there, do not worry. Your card will still look beautiful. We're just going to call any areas where the mask slid snow. But really, with scenic stamping and natural cards, it does not have to be perfect, and just enjoy the process. I think this is so fun. So here I'm just pouncing. I started with a light blue. I believe this is Broken China Distress ink, and then I will also layer in some Evergreen Bough. That is one of my favorite sort of turquoise green colors. And that I am keeping closer to the trunks of the trees and not extending out quite as far, so you get some variation from the green to the light blue as it gets out further. Now I'm going to keep my mask in place and move over to my stamp positioning tool again, and I'm grabbing one of my all-time favorite Penny Black tree stamps for the holidays or winter, 40-714 Before the Snow, and I'm going to stamp this right onto the background, and the mask is going to mask off the birch trees and push this so that these trees look like they are in the background. Now I am using Distress ink to stamp this. I'm using that Evergreen Bough that I used to ink up the background, which will give that a tone-on-tone look. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush with just the tiniest bit of water on it. I've patted it dry a little bit on a paper towel before I even bring it to the paper to blend this, to give it a watercolor look. That also helps me get it up closer to those areas that are masked because they're raised up a little bit. It won't stamp quite as perfectly there. While it's still wet, I can re-stamp it again just to darken it up or recapture some of the details from when I blended it. Now I have moved that over a little bit, and I'm going to follow the same process. So we're kind of creating this forest behind this birch that's in the foreground. What's fun is this technique, once you've cut out the mask, you can reuse it and reuse it. I just store it in the little plastic with my stamp, and you can switch up all the different things that you want to add in the background, which is what we will be doing today. Now, after I had stamped those, I decided to ink them up a little bit more with some green, just to make it a little bit more green for that forest. I'm just pouncing that right on top of the area that I stamped. And I'm also going to add a little bit of Toffee Crunch Memento ink. I like that just to give things sort of a finished edge and a little bit of a vintage feeling. Now comes my favorite part, revealing the mask or taking the mask off. And there is that beautiful birch. Here I've grabbed my Sakura Koi Field Sketch Box, and I just needed a little bit of a gray or a watered down black color just to add some shading onto this trunk. I think this is a little detail that can really make all the difference with this birch tree. You certainly wouldn't have to do it, but it's quite easy. You don't need any special kind of watercolor, just whatever you have on hand. You could even grab your markers and just put a little outline of light gray along one side of the trunk. I also think by adding a little bit of painting to the tree, it makes the whole scene look as if it was painted, because the trees in the background have a watercolor look. And so if you carry that onto the birch tree or to the trunk, that just unifies the whole thing together. So that's what I'm doing here with these watercolors. Just like I do with my inking, I often start light, then I get braver, and then I can darken up that color as I go. But you can see as that goes on there, you start to get more of a roundness to the trunk and just more of a realistic look. And then I'm going to grab my acrylic white paint and just pick that up with my paintbrush and add some snowflakes coming down. You could also splatter the paint on there, but like I've said many times before, they're splattering and me often don't mix, so I have found lately that I just love just putting a few snowflakes on there. It really doesn't take very long, and this way I avoid any big giant blobs onto my project, because the splattering usually comes at the end and I don't want to ruin something I have worked on for a while. Now lastly, I've used our 51-001 in a row die just to color a couple of cardinals for the trees. So I just colored them red, trimmed them out, and added them onto the birch. And here is a look at the first card we're making using our beautiful birch tree stamp. Next we will move on to card number 2. And for this card, I'm also going to incorporate 40-864 Snowy Settlement. So this is also a new stamp, and I do have a video featuring this in a couple of different ways. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel, give it a browse, subscribe while you're here. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. But I have stamped the birch. I did that at the beginning. I've covered it with my mask. As you can see now, the mask is a beautiful color because we used it on the other card. Now I am coloring directly onto the Snowy Settlement stamp using Tombow dual brush markers. I'm still stamping again onto that Bristol smooth cardstock, which allows me to go in and then very easily blend what I have stamped. The Tombow dual brush markers are great for that because they are a water-based marker, so I can get a nice beautiful watercolor look in the background. Doing a couple shades of green, then I'll go in with blue. I like to work in sections on my stamp as opposed to like coloring the whole thing. When I work in sections, then that ink stays pretty wet and gives me time to stamp it down before it dries on the stamp, and I don't have to get into any type of misting on my stamp, which sometimes for me, just like splattering, leads to blobs. So I've done the houses here in a brown, the little cabins, and then I'm just blending that out with my paintbrush a tiniest bit of water on it. So off camera is a little cup of water, and I have a paper towel. So I dip my brush in to clean it off. Then I pat it on the paper towel. So when I actually bring it to the paper, it's not that wet. There's not like big drips of water on there. And then I'm going to darken up some of this area here. You can see how that starts to give a little bit more dimension to those snowy little cabins or homes. And by doing this in the stamp positioning tool, I'm able to work section by section and everything remains intact. And I will blend out this snow here, snow-packed road. Now I am just pressing the Distress Ink Reinker onto an acrylic block, and then I'm going to pick that up as like a watercolor and then paint this onto the snow area just to give it a little bit more shadow. I also really love that sort of turquoise green color of the Distress Ink, the Evergreen Bough, and for me it just adds kind of an unexpected touch for holiday or Christmas cards without being like way out there. It sort of makes the traditional reds, forest greens shine in their own way. Now here I'm just using my ink blending tool and a foam pad and just very lightly inking on top of those trees in the background, almost to give the look of more trees way off in the distance. That was completely dry before I did that. And then I will add some blue up here around the top and to the sky and blend that down into that tree area, starting off of the edge and working my way on in a circular motion. Also trying to leave some white area in the sky too so that it doesn't all get too flat. Darkening up the edges. And here, so fun to reveal that birch. Now we have that in the foreground, and that perfectly sort of pushes back those cabins into the background and makes the scene dimensional without any layers. It's a one-layer card, yet you have this dimension to it. Just like on the previous card, I'm going to grab that black watercolor and just water that down and add some shadows here on the birch tree just to finish it off, tie it into the rest of that watercolored background. And then I couldn't stop. I'm grabbing 40-708 Fragile Beauty, and I'm going to add even some more layers over there by that birch tree. So I'm going to ink this up and stamp right on top of the birch tree. I am using Acorn Archival ink, and I'm going to stamp it more than once just to darken up that color and push that even more into the foreground on top of the birch tree. Here I wanted to bring some of the color from those cabins in the background sort of to this corner in the front, tie it all together. So I'm just stamping that again using the same marker that I used on the cabins. And then finally I'll add a little ink blending here in the foreground just to soften some of that stamping so it's not quite as stark on the white, and then over to this corner. I added my sentiment. It's from 30-917, Joy and Warmth. This is a new sentiment set. Might want to hit pause so you can check them out in more detail. And the card is complete. So this is card number 2 with the new beautiful birch stamp. And we have one more coming up. So here I am taking that panel that I stamped at the very beginning of the video. I've put down the birch tree mask, and then using that Eclipse paper, I've just hand trimmed a snowbank mask. So now here in the background, I'm creating some snow a sort of a hill of snow behind the birch tree, which will be in the foreground. And I'm using my ink blending tool and a foam pad, sort of starting on that mask and pressing it up into the sky with like a sweeping motion so that it starts somewhere that's off the card and then lifts up as it goes. That helps avoid any big blobs on the background. I'm mixing a green and again pulling in that Evergreen Bough color that I love so much. You could also do this with blues. That would be very pretty, even like really dark blues. I think that would be really pretty. Just by changing the colors you use, you can give this another totally different look. You could do a sunset in the background. Now I'm going to pull this into my stamp positioning tool and I'm going to grab some more trees. So this is a tree set 40-756 Tannenbaum Trio. I love the watercolor look of these and they're super easy to work with. So I'm going to grab one of those and I'm going to do some stamping here in the background, sort of like these trees are popping up with this snowbank behind the birch tree. I'm going to ink this with a distress ink, so that's water soluble. I can go back and blend it with my paintbrush. It's going to blend really nicely because I am stamping on the Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. So you can see just my brush with a little bit of water. I can blend that but still keep the detail. I can pull it down there towards the mask so that it's not floating above the mask. And it just looks like this hand-painted watercolor tree in the background. I'll clean that off, slide it over, and get another one on here. Just trying to decide here where I want them to be. I love with this stamp set, you can use the trees with the trunk and then the kind of the ground that they come with, or like I'm doing here, you can stamp it and just get the top part of the tree, making it look like it just goes right down towards the snowy ground. And I'll clean that off and find one more place to put it here. I like to work, when possible, in odd numbers, so this gives me 3 trees in the background, kind of varying their heights as well. And then I'll blend that one out too. Here is my favorite part, taking those masks off, and there you can see that scene coming to life. I actually think this is maybe my favorite one. I'm curious to know, do you have a favorite, the first, second, or the third? Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to know what your favorite was. Again, just adding that watercolor look and that shading onto the birch using just a gray or black watercolor. And I'm even going to grab a little bit of green here to put a shadow along that snowbank line and add a touch of blue to that as well. That kind of mimics that evergreen bough color that is up in the sky. Now I wanted to show you if you have any areas where, like with this, where my mask didn't end at like a tiny little tip, you can just grab some of that white acrylic paint and just paint a little bit more of a tip onto those branches, and that will just kind of finish it off a little bit. I would much rather go back and do this than painstakingly cut out the mask perfectly. And then also I added the snowflakes. My sentiment is from our transparent set Jolly Snippets, probably the handiest sentiment set I've had for Christmas. I love the sizes of these. You can always find something that will fit perfectly, just like this does here on the snowbank. I thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black in so many different places, including Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as Instagram, our website, and our blog. And I will link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. Thanks for watching.